This is a Onenie original podcast.
So Kevin and I were talking the other day, and he was using the words A&R, right?
Yeah.
And you and I have had conversation about them numerous times. So before we get too far into this and what that all means, let's do a quick introduction of Kevin and say who he is and what he's done. And Kevin's been in the music business for almost 30 years at this point.
Yes.
And just goes around and kicks a lot of butt and worked on a bunch of tours, from managing bands and acts and promotions, and ran regions for different companies, some of the biggest on the planet, Sony, DreamWorks, working on the record company side. Now he's teaching bands how to go out, promote themselves, get gigs, and has kind of a whole self-study, especially on the sponsorship side, which I think is going to be an amazing way, because as you and I have talked a dozen times, you got merch and you got ticket sales. You're not getting anything off a record play, so he's really going to help create a different revenue stream for that music space. I'm excited about that. And, you know, the conversation he and I had the other day, I was like, dude, we got to come in and have him sit and talk about just some of the stories.
Yep.
Right? Because 30 years of music, you've seen, worked with, Elton John, U2,
that was my first
the
concert.
Rolling Stones, you know, and the Goo Goo Dolls. You were telling me you were booking the Goo Goo Dolls back in the early 90s. So anyway, lots of cool stuff. So thanks for coming on.
Oh,
We're
thanks for
excited
having
you're
me.
here.
Appreciate it.
I'm excited you're here. So
Yes, he told me the other day that you guys were hanging out. And I was like, why didn't you come get me? And he was like, you guys told me I can't interrupt. I was like, well, no, you could with him.
yeah, it totally works.
'Cause he's-
Right?
Yeah, it's totally cool.
And it's just random, you know, you reached out to me through LinkedIn just, a couple weeks ago, really,
Yeah.
and sent me a message, and we just chatted and decided just to sit down and talk. So I came in last week, but I had met you. I told you the story. I had met you a number of years ago, and I know you probably didn't remember me, and don't even know if you remember that instance. But, you know, here we are.
And I'm glad you remembered that, right? Hat tip to Rick Kraniak and
Oh, really?
another dude with some really cool stories about the music.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, that's the cool thing about music and musicians, and is the stories. And I don't know if and I hope the tail grows taller on down the line. But there are always some good stories, right? You know, when you get together with the accountants, it's like they're not good stories, right? There's no Suge Knight story about where you forgot your pants and got locked out of the hotel. And none of that ever comes down, right, with the accountants.
No.
And
They'll hear about it afterwards, because
Right.
if there was money that needed to be paid out because something got ruined, well, then they get involved. And
But I'm all
then you get yelled
about
at.
doing the ruining, I think, is more, that's the better story, right? There's a time and a place for everything. And tour would be the place I'd want to be.
Tour sounds like the place to be.
Yeah.
Because you can't just ruin a hotel in your hometown. That seems jerky,
Maybe. Yeah.
right? You got to go. You got to be on the road for that kind of stuff.
Well,
Yes, back in the day, that was a norm. But nowadays, you know, I think artists are a lot more cognizant
Yeah.
of expenses and what they're
Well, they're
supposed
probably
to do.
they're running their own tour now, and
lot
you know
of
it's not
times.
like they got an unlimited supply of tour support from a label. It's like their own dime now, right? It's like,
Yeah.
but that was one of the things that was really like, you know, Terry was telling me about you the other day, and I was like, because one of the things that I'm interested in and am clueless about, but totally interested in, is new business models for music. Not just revenue streams, but total business models. Because if touring, you know, used to be to sell records, right? Well, that's okay. How much are you going to make off of Spotify now? It's a totally different thing. So now you got touring and merch. And one of the musicians locally the other day said to me, she's like, you know, the last thing I want to do is tour around the country in a van with a bunch of guys who don't shower 250 nights a week or year. And it's like, it's a hard thing to do if your only revenue stream is going to come from touring and merch. And so I'm on a mission right now to, as you know, a digital company, to figure out what's the new business model for music. How does the musician, not just the record companies, you know, because they're always going to try to figure out a way to do it, but how does the musician legitimately make a living in 2019? And by making a living, I don't necessarily mean Beyonce style, right? That'd be great if they can do that, but how do they just it's a career, right? How do you make $102,000
Four guys in the band, right?
and still be able to have, kids and a family and a life and do all that kind of stuff? So I'm just loving finding that kind of stuff out now.
And it does come down to, it is a business, right? So as an artist, you're a brand, and how do you operate moving forward? When I first got into the industry, it was the music business, right? So music was always forefront. The business side, yeah, whatever, because we did things, there were no rules, right? You became part of this golden inner circle of working for a major label and being part of that fraternity in many respects, and we just did things the way we did things because the majors controlled every aspect of the industry. Today, an independent artist can be successful, if you have the business acumen, just like any other business, to build your brand. So you look at your ancillary income streams, and yes, it is touring, yes, it is merch. More importantly, though, if you're a songwriter and you're a good songwriter, getting those songs placed and licensed out, because that's a huge amount of revenue coming in.
Yep.
I'm a big believer in strategic partnerships. I always have been. So that kind of, because not only is it a potential source of revenue, but you're also being able to expand and further your marketing platform if you put that partnership together correctly with a brand. So, that becomes a big opportunity. And sometimes it's about other, content is big. When you look at, there's a number of successful independent artists out there who are very, very active in the social media world with their website, to the point where, they're always putting out content. And that might be songs, it might be video. But then all of a sudden they have membership. So for $10 a month, you get all of this, if you're a super fan, if you've done a really good job as an artist really building your fan base, and you have a great number of super fans who would be willing to pay $10 a month because they love you so much to be able to get this kind of exclusive content, well, look at that revenue stream, right? Just do the math. You get 400 people at $10 each a month, just for putting up content, things that you should be doing as a creative anyway, because that's what your brand is about. Not a bad little extra amount of revenue.
Right.
Live stream a song, right? You're practicing in the garage, you play.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. I didn't even think about that as an opportunity, and how easy that is to just go and grow. And then all of a sudden you got a monthly baseline. It's a lot easier to add money to existing money than to create money out of thin air.
Yep.
It's I've always said it's it's how creative can you be, and as a business owner, because that as an artist you got to think that way. You've got to think, and if you don't have your if you're not at a point financially where you can bring your own team in, where you have your own manager, you have your own social media person, you have maybe other people you're contracting out to do certain things to help you build your business and your brand. If you are doing this on your own, then you've got to make sure that you're spending as much time learning about the business, initiating a lot of that, but then also finding your balance to also to be that creative. So it's work. It really is work. But, it can be done. And it might be even a situation where as an artist, maybe you don't have the money to hire somebody, but, somebody who's, studying marketing in college. And if they believe in you as an artist, would they be willing to help you out? Do you know anybody in your family or somebody at school who's studying accounting? Right? Could they help you with some of your accounting, measures? These are the things you just got to take a step back. And I know it's hard because, I was an artist once myself. I played in bands. I tried to get signed just like everybody else did back in the day when I was trying to do that. And, it's really, really tough to be able to balance that. But guess what? There are enough artists out there every single day that are doing it and are successful at it.
So let's talk about the evolution. It used to be, record companies controlled the distribution because they were actually physical records. So they were in charge of distribution, so they signed everybody. And everybody wanted to get signed because that was the key of the gatekeepers.
That was the open door, right?
Yeah. So now we don't need necessarily to have them be the gatekeepers. You have direct access to your fans. So how is it, what's the evolution at that point of management, right? Because a manager used to manage the band, almost like be the go-between between the label and the band. What's the role of a manager, now? Because it's a lot of different things. I mean, it's a totally different role.
And so, some respects, yes, but for the most part, you still are, you're managing a business, right? You're managing an artist. You're managing a brand. As a manager, a lot of your job is to make sure that you're putting your artist in a position to succeed. And what does that mean? So it's about having an understanding of all those ancillary revenue streams. What is the best, if you're going to talk about touring, what's the best routing? Where do we go? How do you build your social media? So really, from a manager standpoint, you're overseeing everything that brand is. You're a brand manager in many respects.
I've seen some incredible execution on social media by managers now for some of even the local ones. Amazing digital street teamwork. And then what I'm trying to figure out now, it's like, that's great. We just got, 26,000 views on this live stream. Now what? What's the business model for that? I mean, exposure is important too. But so now what, 26,000 people are now streaming that, going back over to Spotify. It doesn't really help the artist so much. And it's like, there's got to be a way to translate that great digital street team that people are doing now and building up their fan base and building up their social media. It's like, aside from like sync deals, right, in a movie or something, what are some of the other ancillary ways that people are making money now? They're actually getting paid besides merch.
Well, I mean, that is one thing. You got to look at, I'm a big believer of, I've always, when I first got into the industry, I just kind of came up with a couple statements that I've always kind of lived by. Frequency breeds familiarity, and consistency breeds credibility. Over the years, I've added the words patience to that mix and creativity. And I firmly believe if you follow that, you're going to be successful. Not only in the music industry. Oh, here I am tapping. Look at that. Not only in the music industry, but
you're having your hands in your lap too.
See, I'm not even Italian, and I'm talking with my hands. Not only in the music industry, but really anything in life. So that becomes part of what you're doing. You got to look at, because any revenue, any exposure is going to be good, because that you can't bank on everything and put it all in one basket. So you got to have all these other things. You talked about, say, so they get these views, or on social media, people will like what's going on. Well, now you got to start drilling deeper,
right,
and start conversations with these people. You can't just out there tell, oh, I got 26,000 likes. That's fine, but now what? What do you do with those likes? Start the conversation. You want to build a fan base. You want to build super fans. You got to start the conversation with them. You've got to be able to harness bringing them in to your family. I always got what I call the groupie effect, right? Because
we all like groupies.
Anyone on the outside, even when I started playing in bands, the people who really came to see you all the time and really liked you, they felt special when they knew you. Not enough bands take enough time, and if I could go back to when I was playing, we didn't do a good job of this. We on our breaks, instead of just us huddling together and having a drink or just talking to the people we knew, we should not have been talking to the people we know, because they're already part of our group.
Right.
We should have been having conversations with every single person in that club and make them feel like they're part, because I met the band. You go to work the next day, you go to school and say, I met the band, those guys were so cool. And what are they? They're excited, so they're telling their friends about this, and you've welcomed them in to your family. That's how you build super fans. That's what I call the groupie effect. And it could be, it ain't the typical definition of what a groupie is, but I use that as an analogy to get that point across to people. If I'm talking to new artists or if I'm teaching or doing things, to start to think about that, be very cognizant of that. Start the conversation. People want to be part of a community. You are a community. As your brand, how are you going to bring people in to become part of your brand? That's super important, and not enough artists, I think that way, or are they doing that? I mean,
or it's difficult for them to execute on that because they're musicians, they're artists. They're not necessarily I mean, they know how to tweet, but it's not like they're going to set up, they're not going to set up the live streaming setup right now and go live on Facebook with 4 cameras from the gig. That's not their thing. And so that's got to be part of, I think, what the modern day label is and the modern day manager to be able to figure out how to handle all that for them and set it all up. They still got to participate, but it's got to be easy for them to participate.
It's digital distribution and community building as opposed to whatever the record label was doing prior.
And then to me, it's like, yeah, all right. So we've been doing that for a while, right? Everybody, we get that part of it. Now, how do we translate that to brands? How does a brand, like some beer brand or something, connect with that audience via content? Because I think that's kind of where things are going. Right? It's sort of like, why is there I think it's Dunkin' Donuts now, whatever, it used to be Coca-Cola, whatever the pop was in front of the judges on American Idol. It's like, product placement is one thing, but there's got to be a new model of how brands, which are bands, and the musicianship and that community and that cool factor, and how we've got to come up with a mechanism to tie that together with brands right now, so that brands that are trying to sell something can get that brand lift without it being like cheesy, right? Because everybody sees it. If you're going to see it as the brands are always afraid, oh my God, the musician's going to do something crazy. Well, the musicians are afraid that the brand's going to make them look like a dork, right? Or it's going to look like they're going to look like a sellout, right? There's got to be this subtle way to figure out how to do that. A sync deal is great. If you're going to put a song in a movie, you're going to be getting checks forever. But those are harder to do, right? And those are fewer and farther between. But there's got to be the everyday way to put that music together with a brand.
Well, and that's really part of when you're going through your process of putting your strategic partnership plan together, if you're going to go down that road.
So you say strategic partnership plan together and this is as the musician, as the artist.
I use strategic partnership as a term because I believe that the word strategic sponsorship sometimes has
what I liked
negative
was
connotation.
You said plan. So strategic partnership plan or strategic sponsorship plan, you said plan. Not many artists right now have that plan.
Or know they need one.
And some that think they do, but then some don't follow it, right? And they're stuck kind of in between them. But tell me about that. Tell me what you mean by the plan.
Well,
like,
what's the plan being, okay, if you as an artist have decided that you want to, engage working with brands, you believe that is something that could, further your marketing, as I said before, and possibly generate revenue for you. Well, it's really doing your due diligence, sitting down to find out what brands you would like to work with. Because just because you think that you saw, Pepsi as a sponsor of music, well, that might not be. If you don't believe in Pepsi, if you don't use that product and you don't believe in it, stay away from it. Because you really if you truly want to form a long-term partnership with a brand, you better believe in that brand. Hopefully you use that brand. And it's as simple as going through an exercise of sitting down and putting together a whole list of all the things you use in life, right? What toothpaste do you use? What services do you use? Write it all out. What do you believe in? More importantly, then, put a list together of what you don't like and stay away from that. It's not, because if you're just going to do a partnership or sponsorship just for the money, it's not going to be good. It's not going to be good. You've got to make sure, and then you have to have an understanding. Once you figure out what brands you might want to work with, start doing your research and start having conversations. Why do these brands want to partner with music? What's important for them? What are their objectives from a marketing perspective? What are their initiatives? Because what might look good on paper doesn't necessarily mean that brand has that initiative for this year. As you guys very well know, right? Things change, initiatives change, focus changes for these brands. So it might look good, but they don't want to do it. So it takes time. That's a lot of the work that goes into trying to figure out. Now, granted, you can do, these, for the big tours out there, they're going through that process, but that doesn't mean that you as a local artist can't go through that process. And there is a number of great, companies in this town that are looking for what I always say, that marriage between Madison and Vine, right? Between the corporate side
That's a great line.
and the creative side. It wants to happen. I think you and I, Terry, were talking last week. It wasn't too long ago, when I saw, Thornetta Davis, her video of her music being in a Mike Morse commercial. What a great, I don't know anything about who put that partnership together, how that came about, but that's a big TV buy that's being done, and she's getting all of that exposure through that television, and I'm not sure if like I said, I don't think it was her buy, it was his buy. So whatever that partnership, what a great partnership. There you go. There's a strategic partnership that gave her all that television exposure. People who saw that commercial might not have known who Thornetta Davis is, but then seeing her sing and belt out the way she does, she might have picked up fans from that.
And will continue to for a while.
Yeah, I mean, so that that's a great example of a local artist working with a local brand.
And the brand equity that Mike Morse is going to get, anytime someone hears her song, right, they're going to think of him.
Think about that connection,
right?
I mean, because that becomes the sonic part of partnerships. The partnership of sound. Music is emotional. He's in a very emotional. When you think about it, law is a very emotional thing for people. I mean, there's what he does touches the hearts of many people, because these are very, very, could be very tragic types of things, could be very, happy types of things that he goes through. So marrying music and pulling that in, look, music is written from the heart. I've always said this. People don't write, I'm going to make sure that this song is written because I believe the female demographic of 18 to 34 is really going to love this, so I'm going to pen this song to specifically fall within that demographic to make sure that research comes back and the radio stations will start playing it.
Right.
Music's not written that way. Music's written from the heart.
Good music's not written that way. I have a sneaking suspicion there's plenty of music that's written that way at this day and age. Do you guys have kids that are 14 or 15 years old that control the radio? There's some shit out there that has to be somewhat formulaic. The result of a bunch of artificial intelligence saying, this is what actually matters, let's spit out a song.
Well, I guess, that does come into play. I mean, even, from my time, there was formulatic. I mean, people would always say Def Leppard, had the formula, which they did in many respects. Mutt Lange was able to dial that in and really.
But even that's from the heart. I don't know if I buy that was intentional. I mean, if you look at
they found what worked, and they found the sound that worked. And he helped create that sound. I mean, some people said Nickelback was, formulated. I don't know.
Pearl Jam is Jimi Hendrix.
There's a sound, that these bands have, and that's what was able to sustain them for, decades when you think about it. I don't know how many artists coming out today, are going to be still relevant and play in 40 years from now.
Right.
I don't know if we're going to see. When you look at the bands who have been around for decades, there is a consistent sound to what they do. They dialed that in, and sure, there's variations of what they do, but they've still been able to stay within their lane.
A great painter is that way. A great, all great artists have their style, have their thing. That's why people like M.C. Escher. It's not like he's gonna all of a sudden paint the Mona Lisa.
Start using watercolors.
He's gonna do what he does, right? That's his thing, and that's why people like the Stones, and that's why they're like 80 and going on tour but I don't think they intentionally formalized that necessarily. They just play the blues, and
they play what they know.
They play
what they like.
They got a pocket that's what they do. That's how they do it. Pearl Jam is same way.
U2's an interesting, because we were talking a little bit about them last week, right? That they've gone and changed style numerous times, and sometimes it ebbs and works out really well, and a couple of times it does the opposite of that, and
They've been a band though, and within not only staying within the lane that they know, but they've always been ahead of the curve, and everything that they've done. They've created a new lane for themselves in many respects by going ahead of and being ahead of the curve, and formulating then their lane. So they were super smart in regards to everything that they've been able to do, because they've always been on the forefront and continue to be relevant to this day.
That pissed a lot of people off, that iTunes move, when they dumped that album on there. Was it Red? Well, or was that for this? That was for the charity.
Yeah,
Red.
right.
But what?
The other one, yeah, they put that. Everybody got it for. They've got to
Yeah.
deal with Apple for like $200 trillion or something, and then everybody had it one day.
I know Mike has an iPhone. Kevin, do you have an iPhone?
I do.
So-
I got that album.
Do either one of you still have that album on your phone?
I believe I do.
It's not downloaded on my phone. It's
But it's there. Okay. I'm just curious. Because there were people like deleting it and complaining about it. It was like Facebook made a change in how the layout. I'm like, really? You're getting free music. Quit your
I
bitch.
think that speaks to that music is a strange kind of a relationship between the listener and the artist, and all of a sudden it's like, people were like, hey, I didn't initiate this relationship here. Music is very personal to people. It's probably really weird for the musicians, because people, the musician is pouring their heart out through this song, and it's connecting in a way to other people that's very, very visceral. It's very primal. It's very emotional. And, the artists are kind of like, wow, I don't really even know who these people are. But the people who are listening to that music feel like they know who that artist is, right? They feel like they're really, really connected to him. And, if all of a sudden he just gets dumped in your lap like that, I think it skips the part where you didn't go through the part of discovering this artist or discovering that song. And there's a piece of the relationship on that content dump that was missing, I think. And I think it just threw people off, it was sort of.
I do. I agree with that. And I also think that because, today people think music should be free. Everyone thinks, there's a big part of the population who doesn't believe they should be paid for any music whatsoever, that it should be all free. And being dumped something free that they don't like, was an invasion, I think, like you said, of who they are and what they want. Even though it was free, there still is that, hey, look, this is not, it might be free, but I don't want it. I'm still going to walk away from it. Who is this band to just dictate this down to us?
I think the other side of that is that technology, the phone itself, is such a personal device, right? So now all of a sudden there's an invasion of your privacy a little bit, which I'm curious, because I like the idea of it happening, but I don't, it didn't happen to me, so I don't know how I would have felt about it. I like U2, so I'd have been like, hey, that's cool, I got a free U2 album. But if it was, Nickelback, for instance, the second time we brought them up, that's awesome, I'd probably be less excited about it.
Yeah, and some people would love it.
Yeah.
But you're right. But the invasion part is that if they can do that without you knowing, what else can they do
That's the concern.
That was
without
part of it
you
too.
knowing?
And it's not like I don't like U2 or I didn't like the album. I guess if
I was
it showed
happy to
up,
get it. I
if
was
it
like,
showed
this is
up in my
great.
mailbox, I would have been like, wow, this is a really cool thing to do.
Plus,
But
it
there
came
was
with that
something-
BMG thing. You had to buy 13 other ones.
There was something about getting in my car and the MP3 picked up and it just played the first song on iTunes, because that's what happens in my car. If I don't tell it to do anything, it just starts playing random iTunes. And I'm like, what is this U2 song playing? Like, I didn't know what it was. And it just threw me off a little bit.
I mean, maybe what should have happened was that, they should have notified everyone, and then you should have been able to click on something and say, yes, I would like that download at this time,
Right.
or decline
Yep.
the free
Totally.
download.
The subtleties of content and permission within the content, ecosystem is pretty important with that. And those subtleties make a big difference, because I think there was a lot to that U2 deal that was almost, it was a bad thing. It was a bad move for everybody involved, and they could have tweaked it a little bit. But I guess, if you're going to be on the forefront, you got to try some things, and it could have been the biggest runaway success of anything that's ever happened, and it could have been that's the way things are done now. And, Apple would have been the new label. It's essentially what they were doing.
It hasn't happened again, right? There's been nothing like that since this
Well,
happened.
no,
this is
but then
3 or 4 years ago, right?
Spotify happened, and then,
No, so
boom.
Spotify
So
kind
it's
of changed the game.
Totally. Spotify, talk about changing the game.
Yeah.
I mean,
As cool as Pandora was, Spotify's awesome.
so they're in Europe, but they also got around the compulsory licenses. And what they call it now. The Spotify makes it be a loophole because they're calling it a compulsory license versus a mechanical license, and so they don't have to pay.
Well, mechanical license meaning that's basically the licensing for physical.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not physical.
Yeah. Well, that's
So
their argument.
there's a whole there's the whole the whole digital world, which is that's an ongoing learning curve for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know if it ever gets totally set in place because technology is changing every single day. The business changes every single day. So to be able to, I don't know if there's one person who can, stay on top of all of that.
It's hard.
That, the old music model, once it got set, it was set. But then once the digital age came, everything was open. And it will always continue to evolve every single day. I mean, as we sit here, there's new technology being invented and happening.
A download is a mechanical license, and they have to pay it that way. So iTunes is one thing, but then Spotify, even though it's digital music, it's a totally different license, and that's how they get away with splitting up the revenue, and you wind up getting a fraction of a penny for a play versus 30 points of a royalty. I mean, it's amazing, like what digital can do. They completely upended. I mean, that's why we have Apple Radio. I think that's what it's called, right? Their streaming service.
Yeah.
Because
they're doing
they were like, oh, okay, well, if Spotify is going to do that, we can do this over here. But I think vinyl outsold MP3 downloads last year.
Is that true?
I haven't seen
because
the
everybody's
numbers.
streaming right now. Because of the way
So
Spotify rewrote kind of the
one's
license
downloading.
rule.
I see what you're saying. So yeah.
So everybody's streaming, but nobody's downloading. There's a big difference
That makes
because you
sense.
got to pay, and the reason you got to pay $1.29 for a download is because they got to pay the royalty, but they don't have to pay the same kind of royalty for streaming.
Which is interesting because I pay for Spotify, and as such, I get to download. Right, so that's the benefit between don't have to listen to commercials.
Technically,
and
you don't get to download.
Yeah,
You get
I
to have
wonder.
it, but it's you
stored,
don't have it.
It's stored in an app.
It's stored in
It's not
Spotify, and
necessarily on my
that's
phone, though.
gone in a second. It's just that they are placing it on your phone for a distribution purpose, like a content distribution network. But you don't actually, if you look at the license, you don't own that song. You don't own that MP3.
That makes sense. So
You just happen to have it locally, so you don't have to eat up the bandwidth. But again, that's stretching the definition. If they were in the United States, it wouldn't be happening.
different ballgame.
Yeah. Oh, they'd have got killed.
So Mike's a huge Frank Zappa fan. So I'm curious, what would Frank Zappa's take potentially be on this particular topic? I don't know, Kevin, how well I like. Obviously, you know him, right?
No, I've never worked with him. Don't.
okay.
Yeah, so
All
he's
right,
an
well-
artist I have no history with whatsoever.
Okay.
Boy, I don't think I could guess at it. I think it would be a very interesting conversation to have with him. He's very very astute. I think he would certainly be. I think he would be anti-Spotify. Wouldn't necessarily be anti-iTunes because the licensing at least is that way. But I think he would thrive in the modern day music business. Because he definitely wasn't corporate anyways. It's like him, Prince, those guys were trying to do their own thing and create their own super fans and create their own way of doing business in it. I mean, isn't that what Barking Pumpkin Records is? I think they made their own label just so they didn't have to deal with the labels. So I think he would have been, like you were talking about earlier, you've got to treat this as a business and you got to be innovative yourself and you've got to be that person. I think he would thrive right now. I don't think he'd like Spotify, but he would be thriving.
It's interesting because Prince built his own network years ago, right, and did all kinds of private stuff inside of that network, releases, videos, studio visits. So he was following the model you were talking about a while ago. That's very cool.
Yeah, I mean, and he was able to succeed at it at a time where people looked at it, especially from the major label perspective, like you can't do this.
Yeah.
Because there was, I think they were threatened to think that here's a superstar artist going out doing and being successful doing it, it really in many ways as an independent, but still, signed to a major at the time when he was trying to do everything, and then getting out of his deal and then doing what he did. But I mean, it's proven every single
Paisley
day.
Park?
Paisley Park.
Paisley Park.
So Paisley Park and Barking Pumpkin, for the historians out there, that might be your model of what to look for as a musician from a business model moving forward, and then just trying to understand all the idiosyncrasies of the licensing rules and things like that. But
that's part of the
there's a
process
book
of
on my
learning.
desk right now. It's
These
450 pages.
These are case studies, and you as the new artists are out there. If you want to start to understand and learn, definitely look at the successful companies like this that are out there, and see what you might be able to learn and what you may be able to take, and then apply that to what you're doing. And then that's part of the education process. That's part of what an artist has to do today, because you are your own and you can be successful on your own. You don't the majors aren't controlling it anymore. As soon as the digital age happened, every artist out there who puts their music out is automatically an international artist. And back in the old music model, when the label controlled everything, there was, strategic planning to see if you would if it made sense to release you internationally. That necessarily didn't always happen. I mean, we had international departments, but, sometimes it didn't make sense possibly to release an artist internationally if there wasn't enough appetite for that artist. Sometimes you would say, okay, well, maybe we'll try to build something, but sometimes it wasn't always like that. It wasn't automatic. Today, you're automatic. You release, you put it on the internet, you are an international artist.
Yeah, minute one.
Minute one.
It's a whole
So,
different thing.
as you start to monitor what's going on, and then so say if your music's out there and you're seeing, man, I'm getting a lot of play and I'm getting a lot of sales, downloads in Germany. As an artist, what are you going to do? Do you put a plan together to say, should I be touring Germany? I mean, if I'm looking to create, and build fans and find revenue, that is a conversation that I think needs to happen. Doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to do that, but you've got to be thinking that way. And then if the decision is made that maybe I should, how are you going to do that? It's finding a booking agent there, being able to sell who you are, to find the business people to help you achieve what you want to do in another country. Because I don't know anything about Germany. I don't know anything about the German music business, so it's going to take some research.
Speak German.
It's going to take some research. It's going to take some understanding of how the music business works in Germany. You might not be able to learn that sitting here. You're probably going to have to find some people who, are good at it over there.
So that's part of your strategic partnership plan that you were...
You have to. It becomes part of it, not only for that, but from putting your, now you got to put a team together. Because does it make sense? And is it, is it fiscally feasible for you to go do that? And is the return going to be revenue that makes sense? You can't just do it to do it. Sure, you might have all these people, but there's no market for you in that country, then you probably shouldn't. And maybe think about other ways. And because it is the digital age, well, maybe it is about, putting content and being able to put it out there, and give these individuals and these fans in Germany something that they can, work with you. And how do you build that relationship with them?
It's interesting.
Maybe it's doing a house concert, right? And being able to stream it back to Germany. Or recording it and having it as a download. So maybe, for $5, $10, those fans could download that show. And you've done it right in your house.
So much marketing, so much tracking and analytics that has to go along with it to figure out what actually makes sense, right? And I have a sneaking suspicion, to your point earlier, Mike, some of these folks aren't doing that, right? They're not even thinking about it. They don't know what questions to ask, let alone what actions to take. So I'm excited to see your course come out that kind of spells this stuff out a little bit and helps people make sense of it all.
Well, like I said, it is the education part of it. And as an artist, you've got to want to learn. Right? So there are some artists who don't want to learn that part of it, and that's fine. But there are, many other ones that, want to learn, and that's where it starts. You got to want it if you want to, I think, move forward.
Or you need a partner then. You need somebody
find
on the
that
team.
team. Right.
You got to be able to build that business part of it up And, you know, if you just want to be the artist, obviously the artist needs to be the artist and have time to be the artist, but you still got to handle, it's more than just posting on social media. There's an entire...
More than picture taking, more than video.
So you have to have somebody that performs the role of what the label used to do and part of what management used to do. And you basically, everybody has a radio station and everybody has a record label and everybody has all that. That doesn't mean it's going to work. It doesn't mean you just put it on Facebook and call it macaroni. It means you've got to figure out how to get that stuff executed. All of it, all of the things like you were talking earlier, the accounting part of it, the legal part of it. How do you put these deals together? You know, you've got to understand how copyright works and how the licenses work. You've got to understand how to work with people who are going to place your song as part of a sync deal or a content deal. Mm-hmm. And if that's not your bag, where you're not going to go negotiate with advertising agencies, you've got to have that person who handles that for you.
Right, but I still think it's important to at least have a working knowledge of all of these things.
Sure,
so
right.
you know when they're doing well and when they're not.
Right, because there's enough horror stories out there through the years of artists not knowing what's going on. We've all heard about it, and then they were like, well, where'd all my money go? Mm-hmm. Well, you weren't paying attention to the business side of it. Mm-hmm. You put your trust in these team members who, you know, really weren't honest with you, and now you wake up and you have no money. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's crazy.
Salute
It's your business. You know, it's your business. Mm-hmm. You've got to take a handle. You might not be an expert in all these things, but you at least need the working knowledge of it all to at least have somewhat of an intelligent conversation on these topics with your team, or if you need to hire somebody to go do it, you need to have an understanding of that. And that's part of the education and the learning process. And look, in today's music industry, the business part, it changes every day. So you should be always at least finding some time to be reading, you know, some of the trade magazines, or, you know, I get Entrepreneur Magazine. I think you can apply a lot that goes on through those stories and what they teach through that, and apply it to what you are, you know, in your own music business.
Yep.
You know, advertising age, it's Brand Week. I read all this because I take away, sure, you're learning about somebody who opened up a restaurant, but what's the takeaway from the business side of what they're doing? What cool marketing things are they doing? Could you take that same idea that they did and could you apply that to what you're doing? You're only going to know about that if you start to read about that stuff.
Some fun little homework along those lines is you can go to Netflix or Amazon Prime and download the movie The Legend of Shep Gordon.
Oh, our favorite.
Yeah, fantastic.
Never seen it.
Shep
It's
Gordon.
Alice Cooper. His first client was Alice Cooper. He was his manager, and they were living at the hotel on the Sunset Strip with Janis Joplin, and he met Alice Cooper. And they're like, well, let's put an act together. And they're still together. He's still his manager. But then he applied that to chefs, right? Is that where you're going with it?
Just the whole thing.
The whole
right?
celebrity chef thing with Shep Gordon.
Gordon
there
made
you
that
go.
He
industry
said, I love all these chefs, but they don't know how to make any money. So he applied what he'd learned in the music industry with all these, you know, huge bands over, you know, 5 decades as a manager. Teddy Pendergrass was his. You know, there's all kinds of, but he applied it to Emerald was his first one.
Bam.
And then,
Well, it's no different, right? You take an unknown artist, and if you know how to make them a superstar, you can take that same concept and process and make something else. So he decided the chefs could become celebrities. You know, timing was good because food was starting to become, you know, a real hot button for a lot of people.
the merch was good.
There you go. I mean, so he turned an unknown person into a celebrity and a superstar.
Whole mess. That's actually a fascinating ride too. So well worth it, and actually learn some good management tips and what to do on stage and maybe what not to.
Mike Myers did the video or did the documentary.
Yeah,
as like a Valentine love story to him, because apparently everybody that deals with Shep loves him like
nicest guy on the planet.
His managees are quite loyal. They love him. I mean, there's a clearly a deep love for Shep.
Yeah, the goal is to get invited to dinner at his place in Maui and go hang out with the 20 other people that are going to be hanging out there that you'll be like, holy crap, I can't believe I'm sitting with so-and-so. And that's true regardless if you're a prince or, you know, literally prince.
Yeah.
So
It's a good life lesson, though, too, on how you can, you know, forge the business relationship of all those things and loyalty. And, you know, you don't just stay with Alice Cooper for 5 decades or whatever, or 4 decades without doing something right. You know, you got to earn that loyalty from all those people, I guess. And I think in the music industry in particular, there's not, you know, there's a lot of horror stories, as you were alluding to earlier, you know.
But there are, you know, there are
There's
many
a lot of good
managers
ones.
out there who have been, you know, focused on one or two.
Yeah.
You know, for many years, you know, from right from the beginning, Paul McGuinness was U2's manager until he, you know, decided to retire, you know, and handed off the reins. But, you know, it's about trust. It's about an understanding. It's about, you know, family, basically. And, you know, it's about, you know, total communication and transparency because, you know, everyone understands that this is a business and how are we as a team going to succeed at, you know, making this business successful. You know, everyone has to do their part. Everyone has to have an understanding. You know, it's about creating that type of culture, you know, that is positive and, you know, everyone's reinforcing and sure there's going to be disagreements, but, you know, that's like, that happens with anybody. But, you know, what do you take away from that disagreement, you know, and being able to take 2 steps back and have an understanding of why that person across from you has that thought process and yet you have this thought process, you know, and where's the middle ground, you know, because if it all comes back to, okay, let's think about what you said, let's think about what I said, how do we make it work that everything's going to grow from here? And that's hard because a lot of people will dig their feet in and egos come into play. And, you know, some people don't want to be told what to do. It's my way. This is what I believe. I'm not changing.
Or it conflicts with their artistic, you know, ethic.
or their belief in who they are and what their actual role is, right? So you nailed it. When
I mean,
you
that's
said
hard
know
with
your
artists.
role.
They're putting their heart out there. It's not like it's, again, it's not like it's accounting.
It's
you
an
know,
emotional attachment. It's not
like
intellectual.
their soul is like spilled out all over the table. They're, you know,
And you're spending more
correctly
time with your
guarded
band.
with that.
You're spending more time with your band than you are at home,
Yeah.
or even with your own family.
Isn't that what the Beth song was about?
Yeah, it's, you know,
I was thinking about Kiss Army earlier. Nice.
So, you know, there's a lot of moving parts that go into all of that, you know, and, you know, it's some of the things I think from the people from the outside who aren't part of the industry or aren't part of a band, that, you know, those are the inner workings that a lot of people don't understand, you know, but if they did understand and, you know, the trials and tribulations sometimes that an artist goes through, you know, people see that and, you know, it does happen. I mean, some of that's put out there and people become fans and they become even more because then they see that these artists are people first and foremost, right?
They're the most unique people,
They're not
though.
put, you know, but, you know, unfortunately in this world of, you know, celebrities and, you know, sports and athletes and, you know, big artists, you know, people view them like they're, you know, above water. Well, you got to just bring it down. Guess what? They're people too. You know, they
people who
have
can write
feelings, they have
songs.
emotions, they have families. They just happen to have a job that, you know, puts them in that position. But at the end of the day, you know, they still put on their shoes just like you and I put on our shoes. But I think that escapes the thought process of many people today. You know, unfortunately, I think the media, you know, has built up, you know, put these people up on such high walls that, and the expectations are so big. And I think, you know, in many ways, yes, it's helped propel them to where they are today, but in many respects, and we've all seen how sad sometimes these stories are, it ruins people.
Yeah, and for some reason, I think folks have a fascination with watching people that have been put up on a pedestal fall from that pedestal.
Yeah.
So it's probably
The
the same
whole
reason people watch
Schadenfreude.
NASCAR.
Schadenfreude with the celebrities. That's a German word for bringing the German back from earlier.
The scene that
For
you said you
the,
didn't know
the
any
enjoyment
German. Look at
of, you know, watching people fall flat on their face. There's a secret enjoyment for a lot of that, you know. But it's particularly bad for, you know, for me, for musicians, because, you know, it's one thing if you're a different kind of a celebrity, you know, if you're some kind of reality YouTube celebrity, that's not the same thing as a person who writes a song. There's a different kind of species almost of people who are capable of putting together a song and translating some kind of an emotion into audio and then transmitting that into other people. You know, you want to talk about like common cosmic, you know, wavelengths and connections and threads and stuff. That is totally different. That's different even, I mean, I guess, you know, authors are kind of the similar type of a thing, but musicians take that, they don't just write it. If you write a script for a movie, you write a book or something, you kind of have that. If you paint it, you're still a visual kind of a thing. But you know, a musician takes some kind of an emotion and literally translates it into air vibrations, right? To me, it's like the most amazing thing in the world. I have no idea how people even pull it off. It's just fascinating. And, you know, that makes them extremely vulnerable. I think they're the most vulnerable of the artists that are out there.
I would agree. You know, maybe, you know, acting in certain ways, I think, you know, would also from, you know, because you're transforming yourself into something completely different, and being able to, you know, be vulnerable and be able to express that. But you're right. From, you know, if you're, you know, a songwriter and this is what you're doing, I mean, you're right. It's, you know, that emotional connection, and how do you make that, and how do you compete amongst all the other artists that are out there today? Because that's the other big difference, and it probably goes back to what I said earlier about, you know, artists today, who's going to be, you know, around in 40 years, like the old, you know, the artists that we grew up listening to. Number one, back then, the competition wasn't as fierce, right? Because your competition basically was the artists that were signed to the labels, because either you were signed or you weren't. I mean, there were very few independent labels, unless down south, like Sun Records and some of those, you know, or some of the you know, smaller blues independents. But, you know, I played in rock bands, right? So you either really weren't rock indies back in the 70s. You know, there was majors. Either you got signed to a major or you didn't. You know, so I only grew up when you grew up listening to the radio, and basically whatever you heard on the radio, pretty much your thought process was those were the only artists that were out there. And then you go to the record store and you would only see the artists, you know, in the record store, and every one of those was signed to a major label.
It's a cartel.
Yeah, because they didn't have a record otherwise.
Right. Because who could afford,
Right.
you know, unless you had, you know, you came from very, you know,
They controlled the supply.
you had a lot of money, because back then studios, you know, $600, $700, $800 an hour times how many hours to make a record? Who, as an independent artist playing in, you know, in your city, unless you had a family or knew somebody was going to put up that kind of money, you were not recording a record.
Yeah, maybe
Let alone
Pro
if you
Tools
did
is
record it,
what-
how were you going to get it out there? Because no record store was going to take it. You know, how are you going to get it distributed across the country to all of the record stores at the time? How are you going to get press? How are you going? You know, you weren't going to get it done unless you were signed.
Yep.
Today, though,
Pro
well,
Tools
you
and the
can do
internet.
it today. You can do everything on your own today and be successful at it. But you know, and I know you and I talked about this. You know, when I was teaching, very first question I would ask my students on the very first day of class: what is your definition of success in this industry? And I got a lot of blank stares. A lot of, no one's ever asked me that question, nor have I ever really thought about that. You know, because that is super important as you move forward. You have to, and it goes back to putting your plan together, right? What is your definition? If your definition of success in this industry is to sell out arenas and stadiums and tour the world globally and be, you know, the big artist, then please, I go for it. I'll be right behind you. I'll be rooting for you. But also have the reality that probably less than 1% of artists all around the world get to that point.
Right.
But can you be successful doing your business and doing music, the one thing that you love, not having to worry about another job? I got friends of mine who are doing this, where, you know, everybody in the band is making, you know, $80,000 to $100,000 a year, being able to take care of their families. That's a darn good living, and that's success. Because they're not having to work another job. They're doing everything that they always wanted to do. And it's all about music and being able to take care of their family. I mean, a lot of people say, you know, hey, I'd like to make $100,000 a year. that's pretty darn good.
Mm-hmm. Is that what your course is about?
It's tied into it. I mean, there's so many different aspects. I pull from, a lot of my experience, not only in the music industry, but, working on the agency side, having my own business. So I pull from so many things, and I don't know, I've learned to weave it in because it all matters, especially in today's world, right? I've been saying this is a business first and foremost. Learn about other businesses, read about what, people are doing. I just read a great article, and I'm trying to catch up on my Entrepreneur magazine, but there's a great feature article about Richard Rawlings, right? I mean, and how he was able to, get his show up, about cars, doing what he was doing. I mean, it's a fascinating story, how many times he tried and things he took from other things that he was doing, and his persistence. I think he bugged the network for 9 years before they finally said, here you go.
Yep. Yeah, he got told 9,000 times no.
Yeah. It was a great story, though. I took things away from that.
He got told no and tweaked it. He got told no and tweaked it. No,
Yep.
tweak, no, tweak. Keep going. Just keep trucking. Keep swimming. Keep moving forward. Keep making it better. Don't take that criticism so hard. Figure out what do they want? How do I bridge the gap between what's cool and what they have to have and what boxes they have to check, and make it work.
Every great story has that same kind of tenacity and persistence and just grit to it. It's pretty fascinating what a level of consistency there is, and equally fascinating.
20-year overnight sensation.
Yeah, I was just gonna say
Sorry.
the 10-year. I was going 10-year, but overnight success, man. Every overnight success I know has only been doing it for like 8 to 10 years as a rule.
Speaking of Frank Zappa albums, I think that was the 14th or something.
Was it?
Overnight sensation.
Yeah, nice. Yeah,
Which was.
It's pretty amazing. I'm curious as to what do you see that's happening next? Where is it? Any idea where it's going?
I don't know. I don't know if anyone can predict that, just because in today's world there's so much going on that it can turn many different ways at the same time.
I love that you said I don't know.
I don't.
Because in the technology world, that's really the most honest answer, and the one where you can start from that and say, hey, look, it doesn't matter if I know what's going to happen 2 weeks from now, because it's probably going to be something different in 4 weeks. And as long as you can figure out how to adapt as you're going along at 100 miles an hour.
And what makes sense for you.
Yeah.
Right? Because what, no different when I was talking about in regards to, putting those sponsorships, what might make sense might not be best for you. Might be best for somebody else, but not for you.
Yep.
With what you're trying to accomplish. So, having that understanding is going to be super important.
So maybe that's the starting point, right? Just like you ask your classes, what is your definition of success in this industry? Trying to figure out what's right for you and what aligns with your goals and where you want to go is a good starting point for bands.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I know there's artists out there who do this, but have you written a business plan and really seen on paper who you are, not only as an artist but as a business? Okay, because you got to think that way. You have to. You are a business. Regardless of the fact if you realize it or not, you are a business, you are a brand. How are you going to build that brand? How are you going to protect that brand? How are you going to build that business and protect your business to move forward? Have you sat down and wrote a business plan? Just to see it on paper. I think you'd be amazed what you might be putting down and then be able to read it. And it's not to say that once you write it, it's done, because that's a fluid document. That should change as your brand changes, as your business changes. You should go back to that. Any business owner would be doing that. Why shouldn't you? And there's, you can go on the SBA website and they have templates in there to help you write these things. So it's not, and it's free. So, the mere fact that you can sit there, oh my gosh, I don't know how to write a business plan. Well, there's a very step-by-step, go on the SBA website, and there's a template up there, and they will help you write everything and give you.
And even if you partner with somebody, you got to participate in the business plan portion of it. You've got to be, I think a lot of artists are just like, oh, I got a guy who handles that. Oh, you don't have to actually physically know how to do it, but you have to sit there and participate with somebody that's going to do the spreadsheets and sit there with them and do it and understand it. It's not beyond the scope of a normal person's ability to understand basic things. They might be scared of Excel and spreadsheets and formulas and numbers and dollars and taxes, but you still have to sit there with a person who's going to do that and handle it and put that stuff together. You have to viscerally understand. I think this is what you've been saying the whole time.
It's your
you
business.
have to viscerally understand exactly what's happening, not just from an artistic standpoint, but from a business standpoint. You have to be Lars, right? Somebody in the band has to be Lars and understand who's the CEO of this band.
And that becomes part of the process too, as a band, because we go, going back to it, finding your team, right? Well, the first part of the team is the band, okay, and understanding everyone's strengths and weaknesses within the band, right? So this person might have, more of a financial accounting, so that person should take on the role within the band to be that first person to, have that. Somebody might be really good at marketing and promotion or be that extra creative on the business side. Well, they can help formulate those ideas. Who is the leader? Who is the CEO? Whose shoulders does that fall upon?
That's part of a business plan, is making those decisions and having those conversations and talking about that.
Exactly. And having that understanding within the band. And a lot of times, I can think back to, the bands I was in, and we didn't go through that. I wish I would have had that thought process back then to be able to do that. We just, we were just trying to, make money, right? And
play and make
play
money.
and
Get in
make
front of
money.
people.
Get me through college,
and I think
right?
the business
Find chicks.
was happy with that, because if you offload that to the label, right, then they get to do whatever they want, and they keep you, they give you enough to be feeling like you're happy, but you don't really know what's going on. And I think a lot of that's where you hear a lot of the problems within the industry from before is, you didn't really know where your royalties were coming from. You didn't really understand that was a different company that you're not even a part of, just because you signed away. You didn't sign that to get the check. You just signed away your rights, and they just called it Your Name Incorporated, and they're taking the royalty checks from it.
Yeah, you signed it to get the check. There was no doubt. You didn't understand what you were signing because, to your point, you didn't sit through the exercise to figure out what it all meant.
I've seen those contracts
Yeah.
where a person thought that they were signing their royalty agreement, and it was that person's name incorporated, but they had nothing to do with that corporation. And that's where that money went, and somebody else was president of that company and was cashing those checks for decades.
We talk about the whole trust factor, right? And let's be honest, there's all kinds of sleaziness going on in that industry, and there was for a long time. Not that it was exclusive, but there was plenty of it, right? People would figure out how to make a fast buck off of somebody else's talent, and they would do that in a heartbeat. And especially when you say, "Oh no, trust me," made a whole movie
We're
about it.
friends.
It's called Straight Outta Compton. You should see it.
Look, there's distrust in all industries,
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, the music and TV and film and the entertainment industry, it gets publicized more because
And
it's
those
because
people
it's
are
the sexy.
empathic.
These are sexy industries, quote unquote, right? These are the things that people clamor to want to be a part of, and it's the exciting industry. But it
And
happens,
the songwriters
it happens
are
in
trusting people. They're empathic. They don't think, why would somebody do this to me? I would never do this to
Right, I
somebody
wouldn't do it
else.
to someone.
These are
Right.
my friends. We trust each other.
It happens, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a rough part, but that's a rough part for everything. So,
Yeah.
To the point. Oh man, so when I think about you and touring and going to shows and managing territories, what what's one of the first things that comes to mind? What sticks out as something that wasn't like, we talked about you coming, doing a show in Grand Rapids at noon, coming to Detroit to kick off a show in the early afternoon, and then flying to Buffalo to do a nighttime show all in the same stinking day.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like, what? That's kind of a crazy day to me.
That was a crazy day. It's funny. I laugh about it now, but man, I was a nervous wreck the whole day, only because, you want, these events to go off, and it's so important that they be successful, and then you think about, okay, travel, I can't afford to be late. I can't get caught in traffic, once I got to the airport to fly to Buffalo that day, I was like, oh, please don't let my flight be delayed, because I got things, as soon as I land, I got things to do. And, being, the lone representative and not having a team of people, everything fell upon my shoulders, within my role. So it was, self-discipline was, super necessary to be able to make sure that your planning, your time management is there, making sure that, the band can't be late, there can't be no missteps here. We got things to do, but I always prided myself on making sure that, number one, everything's communicated. Number two, really earning the trust of the artist to make sure that they're on board with doing, all the business things that they needed to accomplish. Remember, it was important that these things got done, and we were doing it for a reason. Why? To help build your career. So in everything that I was doing, and so I'll go back to always putting myself into that business mindset. When I got into the industry, it wasn't, I was not a, a shuck and jiver, or, kind of this, large ego person. I was, I approached it from a business perspective. I always did, because by the time I got into the industry, I had done so many other things in life. I was not young. I think when I first got hired, when I was at, first working as an assistant at Chrysalis Records, I was 26 years old. By the time I was hired at Polydor Records, I was 28, 29. So I was a lot older, and I had done other things in my life. I had, been a legal assistant, worked in law firms. I had worked for a bank. I used to repo cars. On the bank side, I wasn't the physical guy to go out and do it, but I was the guy making the determination as to, okay, it's time to repo this thing. So now I got to call those, the crazy people who would go out there and actually, take the cars away.
It's good practice to learn how to deal with the repo guys.
Oh, well, you got to learn their trust too. You want to make sure that they're doing the job the right way, making sure that nobody gets hurt. It's done, legally, right? All within what needs to be done, not like you see in the movies or whatever. It's not that. It's not like that. I mean, there is a process that needs to be done, but it's funny because I just remembered the story about repoing cars. Oh my gosh, when I was working for the bank in Buffalo, one of the accounts that came up, it was like, I don't know, 120 days late. It was like 4 cars and owned by, Rick James, who was from my neighborhood. So I actually had to, and they were on tour, right? And they're, this is during his heyday. Everything's exploding. I'm like, you have enough money. You're just not making the payments, or somebody, your business manager's not making.
You got the money. You just haven't written the check.
Right.
So yeah, I had to make the decision to have those cars repoed, and we did.
On the paperwork for it, does it say Rick James, bitch, or does it?
Well, Rick, that's Rick James is not his real last name, so I knew. And I was like, oh, and I see the address. I'm like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? They're not paying this. I got to pull this trigger. So I pulled the trigger, and I remember him coming in to pay it all off and get the cars back. And we laughed once we saw each other. He's like, dude, I go, hey, it's my job, man. You got the money. Just somebody should have been paying it.
Yeah.
So
You should have answered my
pretty funny
text.
that I had to pull the trigger on 4 cars.
Lucky he's dead, man. Come on, kick your ass for telling that story.
Somebody was saying, though, that I
We
forget who
laughed.
it was. It was an accounting firm.
laughed.
The worst ones at actually paying the bills are the, $700,000 a year
Doctors, yeah. For
that it's like they have the money, they just don't sit down and write out the checks.
No, and depending on, well, doctors, when you think about it, what's their work day? They're so wrapped up in doing what they're doing. They just, probably should just, set up everything automatically. So it just, or have their accountant just pay, right? If they're at that point, just have the accountant pay the bills for you.
You've got
because
the money.
if you're busy, no different than an artist who's on the road, right? Because, or anybody, crew members, right? Everyone's on the road and you're gone for months.
Yeah.
you need somebody to make sure. Or if you get, now in today's world, it's a lot easier,
Right.
You can do everything online. You can set up all your bills and pay it while you're, in Germany. Just get online and pay your bill, or set up automatic payments to come right out of your account. But back in the old days, when you really have to physically write a check and mail it out, well, that took some time.
But even
Sometimes
when
you had to go
you're-
get a stamp too, and that's
Right.
a pain.
Right.
It's ridiculous.
Yes.
I
So
I
things are
remember
different.
those.
It's a little bit easier, but still, it's a process. So having, you need to be able to do that.
Systems are important, man. Just having processes to everything, right? Build them up.
You have to. You have to.
When's your course coming out?
Well, I'm in the process of writing it. So, I just, in my relaunch of what I'm doing and kind of pivoting, the company to kind of go down this road, it's really been in the last few months that I've ramped things up. So, I've put together a full day seminar that I would like to start taking out on the road. And so that then the course will come, course or courses will come off of what the seminar is about. And it's really about teaching, the music industry, the entertainment industry, could be youth sports industry, about strategic sponsorships and how to secure them and what that process looks like. So now it's time to sit down and start writing the courses, and being able to get those out there. So that's next step.
And you
Seminar's done. Now it's about finding a way to get it out there.
You taught at DEMA for years, right? 8-10 years?
Well, at Detroit
Dime?
Institute of Music Education,
Oh,
I
Dime,
came
DEMA.
aboard.
I just make up letters.
Is it? I thought
It's
have I
Dime.
been saying it wrong all
Dime.
along?
No,
Is
no,
it Dime?
it's
Nah,
Sorry.
Dime,
Oh,
Detroit
okay.
Institute of Music Education.
DEMA's how you say it in
That's
German.
yeah, that's the French way.
It's the German pronunciation. Dime.
So I was there for about 3 years.
Okay.
And by then my time was just, I just couldn't handle being able to, put everything in that I felt that needed to be done and done the right way for me, to be able to teach the way I believe needs to be done. It was just everything else I had going on. I just couldn't commit the time anymore. So I had to walk away from that. But I really enjoyed teaching, and really has led me to where I am today, to be able to start to get back and start to show these industries, what I've learned through the years, and be able to help other people too. So, it's just, even having great conversations with artists who have been reaching out to me. I just had an artist from Los Angeles reach out to me, a concert pianist, who, reading my blog and, checked out my website, and, he's starting to think, well, could sponsorship be something applied to what I do? So he's, we've been going back and forth, so I think we're going to try to have a conversation, by phone later this week, and I really want to hear his thoughts on what he thinks, and, really learn a little bit more about him, because, you have to be in a position first and foremost, to see if you're, ready for something like this. It goes back to my seminar. It's broken up, when I wrote this, it's a full day seminar, but it's broken up into 2 parts, morning and afternoon sessions, and the morning session broken up into 2 parts, entitled "Are You Brand Ready?" And there's 2 meanings to that. I believe that you have to have an understanding of brands and what they're looking for in regards to a music partnership with the artist, and what's important to them. So you need an understanding, on that side. But then, are you brand ready? Meaning, you as your brand, have you built your brand and done the things that would put yourself in an attractive position to those brands to be able to sit down and have an intelligent conversation about a potential partnership? Because if you're not brand ready, they're not gonna want to partner with you.
That's
It's
the
like, I had
ultimate
an artist-
question. That's perfect. Are you brand ready?
Are you brand ready? I had an artist reach out to me who, so I tried to do a little research, and I really couldn't find much on him. And I found one piece of music, and it was recorded very poorly. I don't even think it was I don't think the song was even complete. So when we had a conversation, the first words out of his mouth was, I want to hire you to, get me a sponsorship with Pepsi. And I thought, and then I said, so I started digging a little deeper with him, and he, come to find out that him and his partner lives, in Europe. He's here. They have not even put together a whole album. They've never performed live. They don't have a website. They have no social media presence. And, I said, I said, look, I'm very honest with people. I'm be very real with you. I'm not going to gloss over anything. I'm not going to make you feel good. Let's talk realities here. Why? And I asked him, why would Pepsi want to sponsor you? You
we
have
want Pepsi
nothing.
to sponsor this show, actually. I think that's a good idea.
You have nothing to give them, no benefits whatsoever in regards to putting together a partnership. It goes back to they're not brand ready. And I said, it's not to say that, down the road that could happen, because if you do what you're supposed to do, then potentially you can have those conversations with them. But just because you see Pepsi being very active in the music space, which they always have been, doesn't mean that they're going to.
Yeah, because
sponsor you.
nobody else had the idea to get Pepsi for a sponsorship.
It's a choice of a new generation.
They don't have anybody to pick from.
Well, one of the hardest things to understand, one of the hardest conversations to have sometimes, with artists or managers, getting them to understand that with these types of partnerships, it's not about you. If you've done your job and built your foundation and built your brand, you know what you have. It's about how do you take that foundation to help them. Because it is all about helping them. You will win by creating a good partnership if you can show how what you have can help them further their initiative or their objective, or help them, further their brand and help them generate revenue. You're going to win because you will get that fee, and you'll be able to partake in that kind of marketing and be able to expand what you're doing with their money. That's how a true partnership should work. And if it's done the right way, it should be able to continue as long as their objectives fit with what you're doing. And sometimes they don't, right? Sometimes they turn and they think that they want to go down this avenue. That's fine. You've got a great relationship with them. That doesn't mean that they can't come back to, something down the road. Or some of the bigger brands that have so many other brands underneath them. Well, you've done great work for them. Can they introduce you, or is there another avenue with some of the other brands under the big
At least
corporation?
you got a track record with it now. You can take that to, brands want they want to know that you're going to be stable too, right?
Exactly.
They don't want you to think you're going to be crazy or disappear or go ghost them or fall off the face of the earth or do something stupid on Twitter, unless that's part of the deal.
Could be part of the brand promise.
might be part of the strategy to do stupid stuff on Twitter, but if you've got a track record of being able to work with brands, now you really got something. Getting that first one's hard.
It's tough, and that doesn't necessarily mean you need a big one, right? It could be a local company, right?
Just to prove it.
I've done things. I think I was talking to you when I first, my son first got involved playing youth football, and that organization was one of the elite organizations in the area and very hard to get into. So many kids wanted to be a part of it. And back then, actually, for any open spots, they had you had to wait in line. And literally, I camped out overnight with my neighbor to make sure that we were close enough in line. And we got there, registration was on a Saturday morning. We got there at 2 p.m. on Friday, thinking, oh my God, nobody's going to be here, right? There was a line already.
Yeah.
Everyone's got their sleeping bags.
It's like rush tickets.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I used to sleep out. I used to camp out for tickets back in Buffalo. And let me tell you, in the wintertime, that's cold. So we get there and we're like, oh my gosh. So and you don't know how many open spots there are. They don't tell you. Because there's all different there's different levels and different, weight classes, of course. And so you don't know how many openings are within each class. My neighbor and I were the last 2 to get in. But once we got in, I already said to myself, I am not participating in fundraising. I just wasn't believing in it because so many organizations are fundraising. I know that's a way to do it, but having my understanding about sponsorships, I thought, there's an opportunity here. So I talked to the president and asked him if they had ever thought about this type of marketing and this type of revenue generation. He said, no, don't know anything about it. I said, if you're willing to create a board position, I will take that on. I will put this organization in a position through sponsorships to eliminate all fundraising. So nobody will have to
So
do
I
it.
don't have to sell pizza kits.
Well,
No cookies, no
So-
wrapping paper.
I was on that board for 5 years, and in those 5 years, generated over $80,000 in sponsorship money for a youth football organization, working with local companies, no big companies. I proved that you can do this, just like an artist. Local artists here can partner with local companies.
Amen.
It's doable. It's doable. You got to want to do it. You got to believe in doing it. Number one, some artists don't want to do that, right? So that's fine. But if you're an artist who thinks that you want to go down this road, it is doable, and I can show you how to do it. I took that same concept from the youth, and when my son played high school football, and I brought that same concept over to the high school and did that specifically for the football program and generated in 3 years over $50,000 just for the high school football program. I wasn't able to leverage what I was doing with any of the other sports at the high school or the music department, which I really wanted to, and the art department because of budget cuts. They were deficitated so much that I thought I knew I could help, but just wasn't allowed to do it. So I just focused on what we were doing within the football program. No fundraising. So eliminated all that. So the football team didn't have to, parents didn't have to fundraise. All the other sports, right? All the other parents are doing it, but I was able to, help all the football parents not have to go down that road for 3 years.
Perfect.
So it works. It works.
That's fantastic. So I think those are great piece of advice. I think it's great intel. I think the opportunity for bands to start considering who they are, what brands, if bands are thinking about what brands they align with, the products they use, right? How they can say, hey, I can help you create a better future by doing this as a partner with you, and just having that conversation, right? And it normally starts with the owner of a business, a local business, or maybe the marketing department, and just starting to have that conversation. Do you recommend that they put some sort of pitch deck together or something, or what?
That becomes part of the process,
Yeah.
as we work through that, and that becomes part of your strategic sponsorship plan. You're going to have to do that. You're going to have to, understand who you are as a brand and how your brand can help them. So you have to have an understanding of them. What are they trying to accomplish? What's on their agenda for the year? And how do you work together to create that partnership and build that platform?
I can't wait to do the follow-up and have the conversation about where that program actually is, and should we, when it happens and when it's ready,
Bring it back on.
We'll have you
Yeah.
come back and chat through it.
We'll
for
showcase
sure.
the whole thing for sure.
Looking forward to that. This has been a riot, man. Is there anything that you wanted to ask that we didn't ask?
Nah. Well, we could be here for like
We
300 or
do
400
so much,
hours.
yeah.
We can do a number of episodes about the industry, I guess, right?
Yeah, because technically I don't even think we got in any of the fun stories.
Yeah.
I don't think we didn't really need to. There's
Right.
lots of good information.
It's a good start. Hopefully this will be part 1 of 6.
There you go. We could do that too.
It's a regular series on Big Digital Thinkers.
It is now. As long as Kevin's game.
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, guys.
Okay.
I appreciate
It's a
it.
pleasure,
Thank you.
man. Thank you.
That was a Onenie Original Podcast.